The blood trail was faint, almost invisible on the dark forest floor. But Max could smell it. The unmistakable scent of the man who had been his partner, his handler, his family. The German shepherd's powerful legs trembled with exhaustion, his paws cracked and bleeding from the grueling journey. He had been traveling for days, driven by an instinct deeper than training, more powerful than pain. A distant groan echoed through the trees. Max's ears perked up instantly, his tired body suddenly alert. After all this time, after all these miles, could it be? The forest had grown dense and unfamiliar as Max ventured farther from the cabin. Twice he'd encountered coyotes, their hungry eyes tracking his weakened state. But something primal awakened in the retired police dog, hackles raised, teeth bared, reminding the predators that even an exhausted shepherd was a force to reckon with. The previous night, he'd sheltered under a rocky outcrop as thunder rolled across the mountains, lightning illuminating his path for brief, terrifying seconds. Max paused, nose working the air. There, the scent grew stronger. He ignored the burning in his muscles, the sharp pain in his right hind leg where barbed wire had sliced deep during his second day of travel. Nothing would stop him from reaching his destination. Not hunger, not fear, not the beckoning release of surrender. You won't believe the incredible journey this retired police K9 made to save the life of his former handler, or how a bond formed in the line of duty became the miracle that prevented a tragedy no one saw coming. A story of loyalty that would soon captivate not just a small mountain community, but the entire nation. As the first rays of dawn filtered through the trees, Max picked up his pace. Somewhere ahead lay civilization. Somewhere ahead was help, and every second counted. The morning had been quiet in the small town of Riverdale. Sarah Jenkins, 42, dark hair streaked with premature gray and kind eyes that had seen too much, sat at her kitchen table nursing a cup of coffee. As the town's veterinarian, she had treated her fair share of animals, but what stumbled into her yard that morning would change her forever. "I heard scratching at the door," Sarah would later tell reporters, her voice still trembling with disbelief. "When I opened it, there was this German shepherd, emaciated, injured, barely standing. But the look in his eyes, it wasn't defeat, it was determination." Sarah had moved to Riverdale 5 years ago, fleeing the frantic pace of her emergency veterinary practice in Seattle after burnout left her questioning her calling. Her small clinic on the edge of town specialized in large animals, the dairy cows and horses that dotted the surrounding farmland, but she never turned away a pet in need. The locals had come to respect her quiet competence, her gentle hands, and how she could calm the most fractious animal with just her voice. That morning, she had been reviewing patient files while contemplating calling her ex-husband about finalizing their divorce paperwork. The scratching had been a welcome interruption. The dog wore no collar, but Sarah recognized the distinctive scar above his right eye. This was Max, the retired K9 who had served their police department for 7 years before retiring with his handler, former Sergeant James Cooper. "I knew something was wrong," Sarah said. "Max wouldn't leave James willingly. Not ever." Sarah had treated Max once before, extracting a foxtail from his ear shortly after she'd arrived in town. She remembered James Cooper's quiet concern, how he'd stayed beside the examination table the entire time, one hand always touching the shepherd as if their connection couldn't bear even momentary separation. The dog's condition told a harrowing tale of determination. His ribs protruded sharply, his once glossy coat now matted with mud and debris. Most telling was the wild urgency in his eyes. For 8 years, Max and James Cooper had been inseparable. James, 54, a tall man with weathered features and steady hands, had served in the police force for over 2 decades. 4 years ago, after being injured in the line of duty during a drug bust gone wrong, he had retired to a cabin in the mountains, taking Max with him. The bond between them wasn't just handler and K9, it was deeper. They had faced death together, saved each other countless times. Max had been there when James's wife left, unable to handle the stress of loving a man who put his life on the line every day. James had been there when Max took a bullet meant for him during a standoff with a cornered suspect. Their partnership began when Max was just 18 months old, a promising graduate from the K9 training facility in Oregon. James, then a patrol officer who'd been selected for the department's fledgling K9 unit, drove 8 hours to meet his new partner. Colleagues recalled how the usually stoic officer broke into a rare smile when the young shepherd bounded toward him, responding instantly to his voice. Together, they became legends in the department. Their track record was impeccable: 19 successful manhunts, 37 drug busts, and the location of 5 missing children over their career. During the 3rd year of their partnership, Max had located a kidnapped 6-year-old girl concealed in an abandoned mine shaft outside town, navigating through collapsed tunnels too narrow for human rescuers. The girl, Lily Watkins, now a teenager, still visited them each Christmas with homemade dog treats for Max. Their retirement was supposed to be peaceful. Quiet mornings fishing by the lake, long walks through the woods, evenings by the fire, a well-earned rest after years of service. But James had struggled with the transition, the quietness sometimes too loud after years of adrenaline and purpose. Only Max's steady presence anchored him through the darker days. His paws were raw, Sarah recalled, medical training kicking in even through her shock. He had lost at least 15 pounds. There were cuts along his sides from pushing through underbrush, a gash on his shoulder that looked like barbed wire. But it was the blood on his muzzle that wasn't his that scared me most. Sarah's assistant, Emily Chen, had arrived for her shift just as Sarah was attempting to coax Max into the treatment room. Emily, a recent veterinary school graduate doing a rural placement before joining a large practice in Portland, had never seen an animal in such distress, yet still functioning. The dog was operating on pure will, Emily later observed. Physically, he should have collapsed days ago. His electrolytes were dangerously imbalanced, his hydration critical. He had infection setting into at least 2 wounds, but he refused to be treated. Sarah tried to treat Max's wounds, but the dog wouldn't stay still. He paced, whined, barked, ran to the door, then back to her. The message was clear. "Follow me." "I've worked with animals my whole life," Sarah said. "I know when they're trying to tell you something important." She managed to quickly clean the worst wounds and administered subcutaneous fluids, while Emily held Max still, murmuring soothing words that did little to calm the agitated shepherd. Sarah considered sedation, but worried about dampening whatever urgent message the dog was trying to convey. She called the police immediately. Chief Rodriguez, who had served alongside James for 15 years before James's retirement, answered personally. His concern was immediate. James hadn't responded to their weekly check-in call 3 days earlier, something the methodical ex-sergeant had never missed. Chief Rodriguez dispatched 2 officers to James's cabin, but Max wouldn't wait. The moment Sarah opened her truck door, he jumped in, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. The drive to James's cabin took nearly 2 hours, winding up mountain roads still slick from recent rain. Max grew more agitated with every mile, his whines turning to urgent barks as they neared the turnoff to the isolated property. The property lay 20 miles beyond the small hamlet of Pine Creek, where tourism had faded after the mill closed. The last 5 miles weren't even paved, the gravel road deteriorating into little more than a rutted track. Twice, Sarah had to stop to clear fallen branches, remnants of the violent storm that had swept through 3 nights earlier. Each delay made Max pace frantically in the truck bed, his eyes never leaving the road ahead. Sarah's mind raced through possible scenarios, none of them good. James was meticulous about maintenance and safety. Former law enforcement officers rarely shed their cautious habits. If he hadn't called for help, he either couldn't reach a phone or was physically unable to make the call. She recalled conversations with James during his infrequent visits to town for supplies. He'd mentioned chronic pain from his old injuries, how sometimes his leg would seize up without warning. What if he'd fallen somewhere on his extensive property? The cabin had no close neighbors, no one to notice if something went wrong. Officer Mike Daniels was already at the scene when they arrived, his patrol car parked haphazardly in front of the cabin. A younger officer who joined the force after James's retirement, Mike nevertheless knew the legendary K9 handler by reputation. No response at the door, he told Sarah as she rushed from her truck, Max already sprinting past them both. I was about to force entry when you pulled up. They followed Max around to the back of the cabin where a steep slope led down to a ravine. The dog didn't hesitate, plunging down the incline with Sarah and Officer Daniels scrambling behind. The recent rainfall had made the hillside treacherous, mud sliding under their boots as they struggled to keep up with the determined shepherd. What they found nearly stopped Sarah's heart. James Cooper lay at the bottom of the ravine, his body half concealed by fallen leaves and underbrush. His leg was bent at an unnatural angle. Dried blood caked the side of his face from a gash on his temple. He was unconscious, his breathing shallow, his skin pale and cool to the touch. Max stood beside him, tail lowered, nudging James's hand with his nose. When there was no response, he looked up at Sarah, his eyes pleading. The ravine was at least 15 feet deep, the sides steep and slippery from the recent downpour. A broken walking stick lay nearby, suggesting James had been using it when he fell. Scattered near his motionless form were mushrooms, morels that sprouted after spring rains, a delicacy James collected each year, according to Officer Daniels. Sarah's medical training took over as she knelt beside James, feeling for a pulse while Officer Daniels radioed for emergency medical support. The pulse was there, faint but steady. James's skin felt cold and clammy, his breathing labored. When Sarah gently lifted his eyelids, his pupils reacted sluggishly to the light. Clear signs of severe dehydration complicated what appeared to be head trauma and hypothermia. He'd been there for days, Sarah later explained. The doctors said he'd had a stroke while out checking his property lines. He fell down the ravine, broke his leg, couldn't climb back up. If Max hadn't found help when he did, James wouldn't have survived another night. As they waited for the medical helicopter, Sarah covered James with emergency blankets from Officer Daniels' kit. Max never left his handler's side, occasionally licking James's face as if trying to wake him. When the paramedics arrived, the shepherd watched their every move with wary attention, only allowing them near because Sarah kept a reassuring hand on his back. The dog saved his life twice, the lead paramedic later reported. Once by going for help, and again by keeping him warm through those cold nights. We found traces of fur on the victim's clothing. The dog had been lying on top of him, sharing body heat. The journey Max undertook was nothing short of miraculous. GPS tracking later confirmed the distance, 102.7 miles from James's remote cabin to Sarah's clinic in Riverdale, through forests thick with underbrush, across 2 highways, through residential areas where he risked being captured or worse. Wildlife biologists from the State University later retraced Max's likely route using tracking techniques and witness sightings. Professor Elena Vasquez, an expert in canine behavior, marveled at the precision of Max's navigation. Most dogs have a homing instinct, she explained, but Max wasn't going home. He was traveling to a specific person in a specific location who could help his handler. That demonstrates not just extraordinary intelligence, but complex problem-solving and decision-making abilities we rarely see even in highly trained working dogs. The journey had taken Max through territory inhabited by mountain lions and coyotes. He'd crossed the fast-flowing Henderson River, swollen with spring runoff. Security footage from a highway rest stop showed him narrowly avoiding being hit by a semi-truck, limping but determined as he continued his quest. There was a sighting at the Harrison farm, Chief Rodriguez added during a press conference. Their security camera caught Max drinking from a stock tank around 2 a.m., 2 days before he reached town. Mrs. Harrison said their livestock guardian dogs didn't even challenge him. Unusual behavior that suggests they somehow sensed his mission. Dogs have been known to find their way home over incredible distances, but Max wasn't heading home. He was seeking help in the one place he knew he could find it, the town where he and James had once served. The intelligence required to make that decision, Chief Rodriguez would later say in an interview, shaking his head in disbelief. To leave someone you're protective of because staying wouldn't save them, that's beyond training. That's love. Local children began leaving their uneaten lunches along the route Max had traveled, a spontaneous tribute that continued for weeks. A crude shrine of dog toys and thank you notes appeared near the town sign where Max had first been spotted entering Riverdale, exhausted but still moving with purpose. James was airlifted to Regional Medical Center where he underwent emergency surgery. Max refused to leave his side, growling at anyone who tried to separate them. Eventually, the hospital made an unprecedented exception to their no animals policy. Dr. Marcos Delgado, the neurologist who treated James, initially opposed having Max in the ICU, citing infection risks and protocol violations. His mind changed after witnessing Max's behavior during James's first post-operative seizure. The dog alerted us nearly 45 seconds before our monitoring equipment detected the seizure, Dr. Delgado reported. He began barking and placing his paws on the bed rail. When we responded, James was already beginning to seize. That early warning allowed us to administer anti-seizure medication much faster than would have been possible otherwise. Nurse Pratima Sharma took a special interest in the case, bringing Max food from the hospital cafeteria and taking him for short walks in the hospital courtyard between her shifts. Having grown up in a family that trained search and rescue dogs in Nepal, she recognized the unique bond between handler and working dog. In my 30 years of medicine, I've never approved anything like it, Dr. Elaine Mercer, chief of staff, admitted. But the nurse who tried to remove that dog nearly lost a hand. And honestly, I believe Max's presence helped James fight. 3 days later, James Cooper opened his eyes. The first thing he saw was Max, head resting on the edge of his hospital bed, those loyal brown eyes watching his every breath. "He saved my life," James said simply, his voice rough from disuse. "Again." The medical staff documented James's rapid improvement once he regained consciousness, noting that his vital signs stabilized most quickly during the hours when Max was allowed on the bed beside him. Dr. Mercer began recommending similar accommodations for other patients with service animals, initiating a policy change that would eventually be adopted by hospitals throughout the state. The story of Max's incredible journey spread rapidly. Local news covered it first, then national outlets picked it up. The security camera footage of Max limping into town, determined despite his injuries, went viral overnight. Cassandra Washington, a local reporter who had covered James and Max's police career years earlier, broke the story with a front-page feature that was quickly syndicated nationwide. Her piece, titled "The Last Call, a Canine's Ultimate Act of Service," included interviews with James's former colleagues and dramatic reconstruction of Max's likely journey. Social media amplified the story further. Professional athletes shared it with hashtags like #NeverQuit and #LoyaltyDefinition. A children's book author announced plans for an illustrated story based on Max's journey, with proceeds benefiting police K-9 programs. 3 independent filmmakers contacted James's doctors seeking permission to document his recovery. Letters and donations poured in. A local contractor offered to build a more accessible home for James, closer to town. The police department started a fund for Max's medical care and James's recovery. People sent toys, treats, blankets, tokens of support for the 4-legged hero and his handler. Sarah Jenkins found herself unexpectedly in the spotlight as journalists sought her perspective on Max's condition when he arrived at her clinic. The publicity brought so many new clients that she had to hire a second veterinarian to handle the influx. Emily Chen postponed her Portland position to stay on permanently. But Max remained indifferent to his newfound fame. His world was simple. James was his person. James needed him. Nothing else mattered. The story resonated particularly strongly with veterans and first responders. A group of retired canine handlers from across the country organized a benefit concert in Riverdale, raising over $50,000 for the town's police department to establish a permanent canine unit named in Max's honor. 2 months later, James Cooper sat on the porch of his new home, watching the sunset with Max by his side. His recovery was slow. The stroke had left weakness on his right side, the broken leg still healing. But he was alive. The new house, a single-story ranch-style home just outside Riverdale's town limits, featured wide doorways, a roll-in shower, and a fenced yard specifically designed with Max's exercise needs in mind. Local businesses had donated materials and labor, turning the construction into a community event that brought together people from all walks of life, many of whom had been affected by James and Max's work during their years of service. Rebecca Torres, a speech therapist who volunteered at the hospital during James's recovery, now visited 3 times weekly to help him regain full language function. The stroke had affected the speech center in his brain, leaving him struggling with certain words and phrases. She brought her therapy dog, a gentle golden retriever named Sunny, who had formed an unexpected friendship with the more serious German shepherd. "I remember bits and pieces," James confessed, his hand resting on Max's head. "I remember falling, the pain. I remember Max trying to help me climb up, but I couldn't." He paused, swallowing hard. "I remember telling him to go, to save himself. I didn't think he understood." But Max had understood everything. James looked down at his partner, tears in his eyes. "How do you thank someone for something like that? There aren't words." Max, for his part, simply leaned against James's leg, content. As far as he was concerned, this was simply what you did for family. No medals needed, no recognition required. Today, James still walks with a cane, but he walks. Every morning, Max stays close, matching his pace to his partner's slower gait. They make their way to the small park near their new home, where local children often stop to greet the hero dog they've heard so much about. Sarah Jenkins visits regularly, checking on both patients. She and James have developed a friendship that shows signs of deepening into something more, though both are taking it slowly. "The physical wounds have mostly healed," she says. "But what amazes me is the bond between them. It's unshakable." The town of Riverdale has changed too. James, once so isolated, now finds himself part of a community that rallied around him and Max. The retired officer who preferred solitude has grudgingly accepted that some connections are worth the risk of pain. He started volunteering at the local high school, speaking to students interested in law enforcement careers. "Max never gave up on me," James says simply. "Least I can do is follow his example." As for Max, now 10 years old with gray starting to frost his muzzle, life continues as it should. He doesn't know he's a hero. He doesn't understand the magnitude of what he accomplished. He knows only that his person needed him, and he answered the call, just as he had been trained to do, just as his heart demanded. In a world that often seems short on loyalty and courage, Max's journey reminds us of the extraordinary depths of both. Not all heroes wear capes, after all. Some wear fur, and complete their last, most important mission on 4 determined paws. This brings us to the end of this story. Thank you for watching till the end. I hope you enjoyed the story. If you did, don't hesitate to like the video and share it with your friends too. Subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell for more fascinating stories. Have a nice day.